This week on Inside Scoop, how big money is subverting the rule of law, no kings and no civility, and you won't believe who might be running for governor as a Democrat in your home state. Welcome to Inside Scoop, where we talk about all the news that's fit to print in the Washington Examiner magazine. I'm Jim Antle, your host. Liberals have long been concerned about President Donald Trump and have called him an authoritarian, a dictator, an incipient tyrant. But in this second term, they've really settled on the idea of him being a king. Not a symbolic or ceremonial king, a ceremonial head of state. Tip O'Neill used to joke of Ronald Reagan that he thought he was a bad president, but he would have been one hell of a king. But today, liberals think of kings as sort of kings of many, many years ago, a long time ago, where they were all powerful and had all-consuming ability to affect their kingdom. But what happens when the protests against the king affect his subjects? There are many people who now say that support for Donald Trump, or even the Republican Party in any way, amounts to some sort of complicity into this sweeping authoritarian moment in our country's history. We're heading toward Thanksgiving, where many people will need to read articles that will tell them how to behave when seated at a Thanksgiving dinner table with their uncle who maybe voted for Trump while they voted for Kamala Harris or some other even further left-wing candidate. Many people will not even be seated with such an uncle at all, as politics and ideological divisions tear families apart. R.J. Cost in this week's issue talked about this phenomenon and also the question of whether Donald Trump is really an authoritarian in the sense that a lot of his critics mean in the first place. Yes, President Trump frequently pushes the envelope on executive power. There's also the question of to what degree should an elected official under our Constitution, the elected president, who has all of the executive power underneath the Constitution, really be in control of a mostly unelected executive branch. Trump, by attempting to get control of an unelected bureaucracy, is he really behaving like a king? When he tries to control the administrative state or subject unappointed or even people appointed to set terms that cross administrations to his authority as president, is that really behaving as a king? Certainly there are a lot of aspects of Trump's personality and his sense of humor, which is an acquired taste for many people, and many people never acquire it. He certainly behaves in ways that are very different from other presidents, and some would call this behavior unpresidential. But does that by itself mean that he is a king or that he is a dictator? Or does it simply mean that we have a former reality TV host and longtime tabloid celebrity in the Oval Office behaving in ways that maybe are not compatible with the sensibilities of a lot of Americans who didn't vote for him? Are we really in an era of no kings? And what happens when no kings means no quarter for the other side of a democratic political divide? What do you think? Comment down below. And this week I'm joined by Washington Examiner commentary editor Conn Carroll, who's written the magazine's cover story about a strange intersection of Wall Street, the legal profession, and maybe even left-wing ideology. Thanks for joining us today,
Absolutely.
Conn. So Conn, walk us through what this phenomenon is. I mean, we kind of have it illustrated as if it's sort of the wolf of Wall Street on the cover, but it's a little bit more than that. And
well, it's one of those things that I think kind of makes some people feel old. It makes me feel old in the sense that when I went to law school, a lot of what I wrote about was just plainly illegal. But basically what you've had is developments overseas where first in Australia and then in United Kingdom, the common law rules that said that lawyers couldn't use money from other people to finance cases, to have law firms, et cetera, were broken down. So, when I went to law school, the model rules of ethical procedure,
Sure.
would say, you can't mix money with like a bank or with some type of investor. And those rules were there for a reason, right? Because you don't want to have third parties with an interest in a lawsuit that would make it easier for the two parties in that lawsuit to be able to come to agreement, to find justice. But those rules got broken down overseas, and then they came to the United States, first in New York and some other states, and they then, kind of pushed everywhere else, to the extent that now you have just hundreds of millions of dollars being poured in and invested into cases, and they're essentially turning our courts into casinos, just like the stock market is, and that's not what courts are designed to be.
What are some of the examples of how this has really affected the American legal system?
Yeah, sure. I think there's two really good ones that we talk about in the piece. One has to do with Cisco, food wholesaler delivery, mostly for restaurants, okay? And so they were involved in an antitrust lawsuit against meat packers, okay? Chicken, beef, all the rest of it, okay? So their lawyer tells them to bring in this Burford Capital Management, this third-party litigation funding. And they agree to fund the litigation on their part. But then Cisco starts getting settlement offers from the meat packers. Okay, they want to settle. They say, okay, we acknowledge your claims. We want to pay you X amount. But Burford said, no, we're going to veto that settlement offer because it's too low for us. And the reason why is exactly why you don't want third-party litigation to begin with, is because Burford, in addition to investing in those antitrust cases, they had invested in a bunch of other different antitrust cases. And if the settlements in the Cisco case were too low, then that hurts their investment in every other case, right? So now you have a third party coming in, preventing settlement, preventing justice, just so that their investments in all these other cases, which aren't involved in this one, get them more money. And so that really, I think, kind of gets to, why the interests are unaligned. But then it also creates new harms. Okay, and that the tort system, the whole point of the tort system is to incentivize good behavior, right? And so if you're negligent, you'll have to pay damages. It's not to create new harms, okay? But you have this one case where you have this medical device that many women have, generally after childbirth, to kind of make it easier for them. I don't want to try to get into the symptoms, but to make their lives better.
Sure.
So about 15 or so % of these devices end up going bad in some way, okay? But for most women, it doesn't, right?
Right.
But these third-party litigation financiers figured out that they could call women who were doing perfectly fine, tell them to get unnecessary surgery, and then they could capitalize off that surgery because they would get higher settlements if those women underwent surgery. So you have these, marketing firms looking into people's medical records, cold calling them, enticing them with, huge monetary rewards to get unnecessary surgery, and then the end up rewards that they get, the settlements they get after the investors take their cut, are far less than they did. So here you have investment litigation firms basically pushing people to get harmed, to be harmed, that would have never been harmed in the first place without that investment incentive.
So there are obviously ethical implications.
Yes.
In this particular case you just mentioned, there are medical implications. Would seem to me, though, this practice would have significant economic implications as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime you have people that are deemed disincentivized to take risks, to go through certain business plans, is going to be a cost in the economy. And you have to realize here that this third-party litigation financing, it's not really producing anything. You have all these hundreds of millions of dollars that are coming in, okay? They're not building new factories, they're not building new houses, they're not producing anything. They are a net loss on the economy. All they're doing is taking away from other businesses that actually create things. So it's just a huge drain on the real economy.
Is there anything Congress or the courts or any other government body could do potentially to change this?
There's all kinds of things. Actually, the Supreme Court actually sets federal procedure rules for all federal courts. They could unilaterally create disclosure requirements that would force all parties to disclose who is financing the suits in court, which it's amazing to me that's not even a rule now that they have to disclose it. But then also, Congress could just come in and outright ban these third-party litigation agreements, which I think would be the normal course. Because I don't think we should try to normalize the casinoization of our justice system. I think it should just be ended entirely.
Thank you, Conn.
Absolutely.
If you're following us on YouTube, you can read Conn's full article by clicking here on our digital magazine. Looking ahead to next year's elections, two former Republicans are vying to sit in the governor's mansion, but this time as Democrats. Our Amy DeLaura explains how these two Trump critics have left their old party and joined the other team.
In Florida, former Representative David Jolly is running for governor, and so is former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan in Georgia. Both left the Republican Party during the rise of President Donald Trump, but their journeys to the Democratic Party were much different. In 2024, Jolly inherited his seat to represent part of Florida's Gulf Coast. On Capitol Hill, he was considered a centrist among House Republicans. He supported a balanced budget amendment and a ban on offshore drilling. In 2016, Jolly lost his seat to Charlie Crist, a former Florida governor and another Republican turned Democrat. Jolly, a Trump critic, left the GOP in 2018.
I left the party about 5 weeks ago. Because I don't think the future is between the two parties. And I'll tell you the inflection point. We're expecting our first child.
He briefly led the Serve America movement and later joined Andrew Yang's Forward Party. 7 years later, the 52-year-old's political tune is a little different.
This is the home of MAGA, where Donald Trump, the president himself, lives. If change comes to Florida in 26, it will be so disruptive to our national politics.
He joined the Democratic Party this past April before launching his gubernatorial campaign in June.
I am here as a proud Florida Democrat. I'm running for governor of the state of Florida.
Now advocating policy positions strikingly different from his GOP incarnation. Jolly supports expanded abortion rights. Although he still calls himself a gun supporter, Jolly wants additional background checks, liability insurance for all firearm owners, and an assault weapons ban. While he said it should be up to local school districts to decide which books are in libraries, Jolly does support education opt-outs for families. Should Jolly make it through the primary, he's currently running unopposed, he would likely face Representative Byron Donalds or former State House Speaker Paul Riener in the November 3rd, 2026 general election. No Democrat has won the Florida governorship since 1994. Although Jolly's political progression unfolded over several years, Jeff Duncan's happened within months. The 50-year-old is a former minor league baseball player turned businessman. He was elected to the Georgia House in 2012, then became lieutenant governor under Governor Brian Kemp. He was thrust into the national spotlight after the 2020 election. Duncan, Kemp, and GOP Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger resisted efforts by the president and some GOP state legislators to reverse former President Joe Biden's Georgia win by appointing an alternate state of electors.
The right thing to do is to call Donald Trump out for lying, misleading us, and taking our Republican Party straight to the ditch.
After his term ended in 2023, Duncan joined CNN as a contributor, where he championed Nikki Haley's bid for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. When Trump secured the GOP nomination, he endorsed Biden for re-election and then later Vice President Kamala Harris, even speaking at the Democratic National Convention.
I am a Republican. But tonight, I stand here as an American. I realize Trump was a direct threat to democracy.
Even after Trump's November 2024 win, Duncan still called himself a Republican, despite the Georgia Republican Party expelling him in January for disloyalty.
I was leaving anyway.
That changed in August when Duncan suddenly announced he was a Democrat.
But I'm proud to say I'm a Democrat. I'm proud to be able to show up to work now every day and have a better toolkit to love my neighbor with.
A month later, Duncan is running for governor as a Democrat.
I'm running for governor to put Georgians in the best position and to make Georgia the front line of democracy and a backstop against extremism.
No Democrat has won Georgia's governorship since 1998. Duncan's path to the governor's mansion is more competitive. He's up against former Atlanta Mayor Kesha Lance Bottoms and former DeKalb County CEO Michael Thurmond, both polling well ahead of Duncan. Whoever wins the Democratic nomination will face a tough general election Republican opponent. Raffensperger is seeking the GOP nomination, along with Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr, although both are considered underdogs against Trump-endorsed Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. Perhaps the biggest challenge for Jolly and Duncan is whether their party shifts will lead to success or political irrelevance. I'm Amy DeLaura for Washington Examiner.
You can read that story and all the articles we discussed in today's show in the Washington Examiner magazine. This has been your Inside Scoop. I'm Jim Antle, your host. We'll catch you next time.